Rain lashed the alley, a cold hand against Detective Grayson's trench coat. The relentless downpour mirrored the turmoil in his mind, each drop a reminder of the grim reality he faced. The stench of copper, sharp and metallic, clung to the air, mingling with the scent of wet asphalt. It was a smell Grayson had become all too familiar with over the years. He knelt beside the body, a young woman, her eyes wide and vacant, reflecting the flashing red and blue of the patrol car lights. Her lifeless gaze seemed to pierce through him, a silent plea for justice. Her throat, a gruesome canvas, bore the mark of the killer, a spiral carved with unsettling precision, almost surgical. The intricate design was both horrifying and mesmerizing. It wasn't just a wound, it was a statement, a macabre signature etched in flesh. The killer had taken their time, ensuring every detail was perfect. Grayson, a veteran of the force, felt a chill crawl up his spine. Despite his years of experience, this scene was unlike anything he had ever encountered. He'd seen his share of horrors, but this was different. There was a methodical madness to it, a calculated cruelty that set it apart. He traced the spiral with his gaze, the lines twisting and turning, drawing him in. Each curve seemed to tell a story, a dark narrative of pain and suffering. A wave of dizziness swept over him, the world around him blurring for a moment. It was as if the spiral was pulling him into its depths, a vortex of despair. He shook his head, clearing the fog. He couldn't afford to lose focus now. There was too much at stake. This case, he could feel it in his gut, was going to be a long, dark journey into the heart of madness. And Grayson was determined to see it through, no matter where it led. The victims, seemingly unconnected, shared a chilling commonality, the spiral. A businessman found slumped over his desk, a dancer draped across the stage, a homeless man in a grimy doorway. Each death a brutal work of art, the spiral carved deeper, more intricate. Days bled into weeks, the body count rising. Grayson, consumed by the case, barely slept. He pored over files, interrogated witnesses, chased dead-end leads. The city held its breath, a collective shudder running down its spine. The press, hungry for answers, dubbed the killer the spiral carver. The investigation led Grayson to the city's underbelly, a labyrinth of secrets and lies. He spoke to informants, their voices hushed whispers in smoky back rooms. The name, the many hands surfaced, a whisper of a legend. A shadowy organization whispered about in hushed tones. Grayson studied the latest photograph, his brow furrowed. The spiral etched onto the victim's chest was a masterpiece of morbid artistry. It wasn't the work of a crazed amateur. It spoke of skill, of control, of a chillingly steady hand. He visited the city morgue, the air thick with the scent of formaldehyde. The medical examiner, a stoic man with weary eyes, confirmed his suspicions. Whoever did this, he said, pointing to the spiral, they knew anatomy. They were precise, deliberate. This wasn't just about killing, it was about control, about leaving a mark, a message. But what was the message? What dark symphony was the spiral carver composing with the blood of his victims? The answer, Grayson knew, lay hidden within the labyrinthine twists of the killer's mind. Sleep, when it came, offered no solace. Nightmares filled with swirling spirals and bloodshot eyes haunted him. He felt himself slipping, the lines between sanity and madness blurring. The city's fear, palpable now, seeped into his bones. He started seeing spirals everywhere, in the coffee rings on his desk, in the eddies of smoke from his cigarette, in the patterns of the city lights at night. His obsession with the case bordered on madness, pushing away his colleagues, his friends, his own reflection in the mirror. One night, staring at his bloodshot eyes in the bathroom mirror, he noticed something. A faint, almost imperceptible mark on his palm, a spiral. Panic seized him, his heart pounding against his ribs. Was he losing his mind, or was something far more sinister at play? Section 5. A Voice from the Abyss, the Survivor's Tale. The break in the case came from an unexpected source, a survivor. This lone voice, emerging from the shadows of near death, brought with it a tale that would shake the very foundations of the investigation. A young musician left for dead, bearing the mark of the spiral on his arm. This symbol, etched into his flesh, was a clue that hinted at something far more sinister than a random act of violence. He spoke of a hooded figure, of a cold, emotionless voice, and a shared chanting, "The many hands shape the clay." These words, repeated in a haunting monotone, suggested a ritualistic element to the crime. His words, fragmented and laced with terror, painted a picture of a ritualistic killing, a sacrifice to some unknown entity. Each detail he provided, though disjointed, added to the growing sense of dread. He spoke of a shared consciousness, of a collective will guiding the killer's hand. This notion of a hive mind working in unison was both fascinating and horrifying. The survivor's testimony sent a chill down Grayson's spine. The detective, seasoned and skeptical, found himself grappling with the possibility of a reality he had always dismissed. He had initially dismissed the rumors of a cult, of a supernatural force at play. Such ideas seemed far-fetched, the stuff of fiction rather than fact. But now, staring into the abyss of the survivor's terror, he could no longer deny the possibility that something truly evil was at work. The evidence, though terrifying, was becoming impossible to ignore. Section 6. The spiral uncoils, revelation and terror. The pieces clicked into place with terrifying clarity. The spiral wasn't just a symbol. It was a conduit, a channel for something ancient and evil. The many hands, the cult, were merely puppets, their wills subsumed by a force beyond human comprehension. He remembered the spiral on his palm. It was a mark, a brand, a claim. He wasn't just hunting the spiral carver. He was part of something larger, something terrifying. His every move, every thought, every breath was being orchestrated. Panic turned to ice in his veins. He was a puppet, dancing to a tune played by a malevolent entity. The weight of his realization was crushing, a suffocating truth that threatened to consume him whole. Section 7, The Hands of Fate, a city in fear. Terror gripped the city. The murders continued, escalating in their brutality. The spiral carver, no longer a solitary figure, seemed to be everywhere at once, a manifestation of the city's collective fear. The line between reality and nightmare blurred. Churches overflowed with the desperate and the devout, their prayers echoing in the cold night air. The wealthy fled, leaving behind empty mansions and a city teetering on the brink. The police, overwhelmed and outmatched, could only watch as the city descended into chaos. The killings weren't random, they were orchestrated, each one a sacrifice, pushing the city closer to some unimaginable abyss. The many hands were everywhere, their influence spreading like a virus. Section 8. Epilogue. Alone in the darkness. Grayson sat alone in his darkened apartment, the city's fear a tangible presence. The weight of his mission pressed heavily on his shoulders, a burden he could not escape. His gun lay on the table, cold and heavy. It was a tool, a means to an end, but also a symbol of the violence that had consumed his life. He stared at the spiral on his palm, its glow pulsating faintly, a constant reminder of his enslavement. The mark was a curse, binding him to a fate he never chose. He was no longer Detective Arthur Grayson. The man he once was had been eroded by the darkness, replaced by something unrecognizable. He was a vessel, an instrument of the many hands, his will subsumed by the entity that held the city hostage. The many hands had twisted his purpose, turning him into their pawn. He was both the hunter and the hunted, the puppet master and the puppet. The duality of his existence tore at his sanity, leaving him in a perpetual state of conflict. He knew what he had to do. The path ahead was clear, though fraught with peril and uncertainty. He picked up the gun, the metal cold against his skin. It was a familiar weight, one that brought both comfort and dread. He had to stop the spiral carver, even if it meant ending the puppet and the puppeteer, in one final desperate act. The stakes were higher than ever, and failure was not an option. A single gunshot echoed in the night, swallowed by the city's fear. The sound was a harbinger of change, a signal that the battle was far from over.